This is a Fox News alert. I'm Bret Baier in Washington. What authorities are calling a botched attempt at terrorism in a familiar place tonight. Police in Brussels, Belgium say soldiers, quote, neutralized a person at a train station. He is believed to have had a bomb. There are no casualties besides the suspect that we're hearing about. It's the latest attack in a week of terrorist and extremist assaults in the capitals of Europe. Senior Foreign Affairs correspondent Amy Kellogg is watching the breaking developments tonight from London. Hello, Amy.
Hi, Brett. Well, Belgian soldiers prevented what appears could have been a deadly attack at the central station in Brussels. Now, details are still emerging, Brett, but what it appears happened is that these soldiers approached a man who looked suspicious to them. He had a suitcase and an explosives belt, and as they approached, he detonated that bag and ran. Police then shot him.
We do not know if the man is still alive or that he is dead. There were no other victims. This incident is considered as a terrorist attack.
The station and Brussels Grand Place were evacuated. Eyewitnesses say the suspect shouted Allahu Akbar before he blew up his suitcase. Police later carried out a controlled explosion on his belt. No one other than the suspect was injured. Here's an image of the scene after that explosion, which was relatively small. As you can see, this occurred in an underground part of the station. Belgium has seen a significant increase of security patrols since attacks on the airport and a metro station in the EU quarter in March of 2016, which left 32 people dead. Belgium has also come under scrutiny as several of those involved in the Paris terror attacks on cafes, stadiums, and the Bataclan Theater in November of 2015 came from there. One of the key planners of those attacks, Abdelhamid Abaoud, hailed from the Molenbeek neighborhood of Brussels, which has struggled with a radicalization program. Abaoud had traveled to Syria and back and across Europe, even though he was on an international arrest warrant, raising questions about the viability of Europe's visa-free system known as Schengen. Also, one of the Paris attackers, Salah Abdel Salam, on the night of the Paris attacks, actually crossed back into Belgium, where he remained in hiding for 4 months, the subject of one of Europe's most high-profile manhunts. He was ultimately arrested and jailed. And again, Brett, tonight's attack in Belgium, which luckily did not result in any great damage or injuries, comes just one day after a failed attack in Paris when someone rammed a car into a police van. It went into flames. There were guns and explosives inside, but no one was hurt. And then, of course, there was that attack on the mosque here in London on Sunday night, Brett.
Yeah, dangerous time in Europe. Amy Kellogg live in London. Amy, thank you. Another Fox News alert, this one back here at home. This one an election alert. Most polls in Georgia's suburban Atlanta 6th district will close in about 1 hour. Karen Handel is trying to hold on to the traditionally Republican seat vacated by the president's new Health and Human Services Secretary, Tom Price. Democrat John Ossoff, boosted by millions of dollars in out-of-state donations, is threatening to pull off an upset. It could have repercussions here in Washington and possibly set the table for 2018 races to come. We have Fox team coverage on this tonight. Kevin Cork's at the White House with what's at stake for the Trump administration in Georgia tonight. First up, correspondent Jonathan Sari in Sandy Springs, Georgia. Good evening, Jonathan.
Good evening, Brett. Most polls will be closing at 7 o'clock. However, this afternoon, a judge ordered 2 voting locations in DeKalb County to remain open until 7:30 because of technical problems with the voting machines in this high-profile election. With campaign spending topping $50 million, the most expensive U.S. House race in history, Georgia's 6th congressional district is considered a must-win by both Republicans and Democrats.
Analysts from both parties say it's basically going to be a coin flip at this point. They say it's that close.
A big change for a district that has favored establishment Republicans for nearly 4 decades, electing the likes of former House Speaker Newt Gingrich and current Health and Human Services Secretary Tom Price, who won the district with more than 60% of the vote. But Democrats see an opportunity. In November, President Trump carried this district by a narrow 1.5% margin.
There are no margins to give here. We don't have 20 points to play with. We have 1.5% to play with. And we saw many precincts where Trump won by a hair in November, Ossoff won with that outright majority in the first round of this voting.
I'm John Ossoff, and both parties in Washington waste too much of your money.
Former congressional staffer John Ossoff hopes to appeal to moderate Republicans and independents, but Karen Handel and outside conservative groups are trying to tie the Democrat to the liberal wing of his party.
We can defeat Ossoff and the childish radicals.
Handel, Georgia's former Secretary of State, is getting support from House Majority Whip Steve Scalise, who survived a gunshot in last week's attack on the Republican congressional baseball team. The Louisiana congressman tweeting, "Karen Handel is a great candidate, and Team Scalise is pulling for her." But Democrats see this Georgia district as their best opportunity to take a seat from the GOP in the 5 special elections to fill congressional vacancies created by Trump appointees.
A win in the 6th district will show that people will elect a moderate Democrat like John Ossoff.
And voter turnout is reaching record numbers, and with all the money and national media attention, one Republican strategist jokes this is the closest Georgia comes to feeling like New Hampshire. Brett?
Jonathan Zeri in Sandy Springs. Jonathan, thank you. Many experts are viewing this Georgia race as a vote on President Trump. Correspondent Kevin Cork's at the White House tonight, where they don't necessarily endorse that view. Good evening, Kevin.
Hey, good evening, Brett, and you're right about that. Look, it's no secret that Republicans, and in particular here at the White House, they feel like a win by the GOP in the Georgia 6th race would further their argument that the 2016 election wasn't a one-off. It was part of a Trump wave that continues. But they also caution that even a loss won't derail the president's plans. Even on a day when the president welcomed his Ukrainian counterpart to the White House, he made no secret of his keen interest in the congressional race for the Georgia 6th district. Mr. Trump tweeting, "Karen Handel for Congress. She will fight for lower taxes, great health care, strong security, a hard worker who will never give up. Vote today." Democrat John Ossoff, who wants to raise your taxes to the highest level and is weak on crime and security, doesn't even live in district. The White House officials today were reluctant to weigh in on the race itself. They did acknowledge the president would be paying attention.
It's no surprise that the president is going to support Republicans up and down the ticket, especially to maintain our majorities in the House and the Senate as we move forward. So obviously, as you've noted, he has tweeted about that. He believes that there's a clear and stark choice.
The race's outcome could have a significant impact on the White House's bid to advance its agenda on Capitol Hill, including major policy initiatives on infrastructure, health care, and tax reform. While some political experts have suggested the race could be a referendum on the Trump presidency, others caution reading too much into the outcome.
We will read an enormous amount into the result. Some of it will be justified, most of it probably won't be, and a month from now we'll be talking about something else.
The president has lumped the Georgia contest in with a South Carolina race also taking place Tuesday, saying a win by Democrats in either case would mean more obstruction and fewer accomplishments on behalf of the American people, something polls suggest the White House needs to do more of, with the latest CBS national survey showing just 36% of Americans approving of the president's job performance, though the same poll found that most think he's faced far more criticism than his predecessors. And more on the referendum aspect of this story, Brett. It's that divide, the one that on the one hand sees the president as doing a poor job, and the other that sees the press as being simply unfair to him, could well play out tonight at the ballot box with an implication that reaches far beyond Georgia's borders. Brett?
Kevin Cork live on the North Lawn. Kevin, thank you. As Kevin just mentioned, voters in South Carolina's 5th district are going to the polls today, replacing the president's new budget director, Mick Mulvaney. Republican Ralph Norman is favored over Democrat Archie Parnell in a race that has also been a lot about President Trump.
I appreciate what Donald Trump has done. I support the president, and I want to bring his message to the 5th District of all that he's accomplished. He's doing a great job. He started off right with Neil Gorsuch, and he's continuing, particularly in the economy and with what he's doing for business. So I'm 100% supporter.
The only thing that I can agree with my opponent about is the fact that we are so starkly different. And he's given President Trump a grade of A+++. I cannot agree with that.
We'll have all the results tonight on our election special, 11 p.m. Eastern Time. So what do you think? Do you think these special congressional elections are that important? Let me know on Twitter at Bret Baier. You can use the hashtag special report, or on Facebook at facebook.com/Bret Baier. Again, we'll have all the results 11 p.m. Eastern Time. Now news overseas. A Russian warplane armed to the teeth came way too close for comfort to an American reconnaissance plane over the Baltic Sea yesterday. It is the latest escalation in what could be a deadly game of cat and mouse in the skies over and near Syria. National Security Correspondent Jennifer Griffin is monitoring the situation from the Pentagon tonight. Good evening, Jennifer.
Good evening, Brett. A Russian fighter jet armed with air-to-air missiles flew within 5 feet of a U.S. spy plane in the Baltic Sea Monday. The Russian fighter jet's wings were dirty, meaning it was armed with missiles under its wings. Pentagon spokesman Captain Jeff Davis said the Russian pilot had poor control and was coming in at a high rate of speed. This happened just one day after a U.S. Navy F-18 Super Hornet shot down a Syrian jet near the ISIS stronghold of Raqqa, which led to the Russians issuing a stark warning to U.S. warplanes flying west of the Euphrates River in Syria. During a recent NATO military exercise in the Baltics, Russian warplanes photobombed these American bombers. Monday's incident in the Baltics comes just a month after a Russian fighter jet buzzed a U.S. Navy surveillance aircraft over the Black Sea. And in February, Russian jets buzzed a U.S. Navy guided missile destroyer in the Black Sea while the U.S. Army was unloading dozens of tanks, and 500 American soldiers arrived in a port in nearby Romania. 2 months later, that same destroyer, USS Porter, fired Tomahawk cruise missiles into Syria, hitting an airbase belonging to the Russian-backed Assad regime.
Thank you very much. It's a great honor to be with President Poroshenko of the Ukraine.
White House President Trump met President Poroshenko of Ukraine and raised eyebrows when he called his country the Ukraine, a reference to pre-1991 when Ukraine was Soviet territory ruled by Moscow, a slip of the tongue that is fraught with meaning given Russia's invasion of Crimea and eastern Ukraine. On Capitol Hill, Senator John McCain today had harsh words for President Trump's pick for Deputy Secretary of Defense, former Boeing executive Patrick Shanahan, at today's confirmation hearing.
The answers that you gave to the questions, whether intentionally or unintentionally, were almost condescending. Defensive weapons for Ukraine? Well, something we ought to discuss.
McCain is a staunch defender of Ukraine and has been frustrated with the last 2 administrations for not helping it stand up to Russia. He asked the nominee for the Pentagon's #2 job to resubmit his answers to Congress. Brett?
Jennifer Griffin live at the Pentagon. Jennifer, thank you. Let's get more on the growing tensions in the region and that meeting today from Ukrainian President Petro Poroshenko. Mr. President, thanks for being here.
Thank you for the invitation, Brett.
Let me ask you about that meeting, how it went, and your perception of things.
If you're talking one word, meeting was great. And this is a very special day of the Ukraine-U.S. relation. That was my first meeting with the American president, and I see the real leader. We really enjoy the very strong message for support our territorial integrity, our sovereignty, and our independence, and our fight for freedom and democracy. And we really enjoy the full-size support the President Trump, Vice President Pence demonstrate to Ukraine, to my 45 million nation.
And have you seen a change? We talked a year ago in the position of the U.S. in supporting Ukraine.
First of all, we really have 2 blocks of the conversation. First, that would be a great deal of peace. Today, exactly 3 years, because on the 20th of June, year 2014, me, the new elected president, was declared a ceasefire and stopped the fire for the 10 days, waiting until Russia will stop killing my soldiers and my civilians. Unfortunately, we don't deliver any results, but we demonstrate that me is a president of peace. And I'm absolutely confident that when the President Trump, the real leader, the very charismatic person, can help me to bring peace to my land, the same way like Reagan bring the victory on the Cold War without one single shot. I strongly believe. And another thing, it is a great story of success because we speak about the effective cooperation between Ukraine and US in economic sphere. To find out the coal from Pennsylvania to Ukrainian power station, the LNG from Louisiana to Ukrainian gas transportation system, there are many things from Holtec and Westinghouse for our nuclear industry, and many, many others.
Last year, when we talked, it was in the middle of the presidential election, but I asked you about Russia specifically. Take a listen. How many Russian troops do you think are still in your country?
We know for sure that now it's above 6,000 regular troops on the occupied territory in the east of my country, plus more than 50,000 troops in Crimea, plus 40,000 troops, which was local militia. So this is a huge contingent, which is more than the army of the many European countries. Look, this is very simple situation. Putin is the president of the country who is an aggressor for my country. And if you ask me if I trust Putin, no, I don't trust him.
Still don't trust him.
Look, we have now, after this 1 year, better understanding of the situation. Putin, very important and strong message was that the biggest tragedy of the 20th century for him was the collapse of the Soviet Union. And he now tried to undertake the enormous efforts, tried to rebuild Russian Empire or to renew Soviet Union. But we don't give him one tiny single chance, because during the last 2 months we Ukrainian nation, my 45 million people received the visa-free for European Union, and that was the final farewell to the Russian Empire and to President Putin.
How many Russian troops, or Russian militiamen, if you want to call them, are still in your country? Do you know?
Exactly, because we have a very well-coordinated exchange with the intelligence data with NATO, with US, with our European partners, and today we have more than 3,000 regular Russian troops on my territory, plus the Russian-operated proxies, altogether more than 40,000. And we have more tanks, more multi-rocket launch system, and more artillery on this occupied territory than in Bundeswehr in Germany.
Have there been direct fire incidents between Russia and Ukraine?
Definitely. We just 2 days ago captured the 2 Russian military medics, which has Russian passports, cannot explain what they do on the occupied territory, and do some very strange version. And we are absolutely confident that Russia should withdraw their troops from our territory. Russia should withdraw artillery, tanks, and everything. And without that, sanctions should be continued. And this is the message we hear today from the President Trump, from Vice President Pence.
You heard that from President Trump?
Absolutely, that the sanction will be in force until the full implementation of Minsk Agreement.
So, Mr. President, when you see the coverage of the investigations into allegations of collusion between the Russians and the Trump campaign, and the investigations into obstruction of justice as they've evolved, how do you look at them? What's your perception after meeting with President Trump and the administration today?
He don't look like a person who has this any special relation, definitely. But I hate the idea to influence on any
I understand. I just wanted to know your perception.
But my personal perception that this is a great leader, he has a great charisma, he has a great political will, and he is a strong friend of Ukraine who helped me to bring the peace on my country. This is extremely important. And we have a very effective negotiation for defensive weapons. We talk that we don't need to attack anybody, but we want to have an effective mechanism to defend by radio electronic warfare, by drones, by everything. to defend our territory from the Russian offensive and to present to the world the absolutely objective information: who is violating ceasefire, when we were attacked, including our civilian object, who is killing Ukrainian civilians, who is killing Ukrainian soldiers, and who is responsible for this before the court.
Last thing, quickly, Mr. President, what's the most important challenge for you?
Look, I want to reach two things. Point number one, I want to bring peace to my land and deoccupied Ukraine, and I want to make a reform, very strong reform. And if you allow me, the real Ukraine is born right now, and my team, really would be proud if we can have a unique opportunity to be the founder of the new state, Ukraine.
Mr. President, we appreciate your time.
Thank you, Brett.
When we come back, Republican senators, an American fighter jet shot down an armed Iranian drone today as it advanced on coalition forces in southern Syria. It's the second time in less than a month the U.S. has shot down an Iranian drone. It comes just one day after an American warplane destroyed a Syrian fighter jet that had dropped bombs on U.S.-backed Syrian opposition forces. We're getting considerable reaction to the death of an American student released recently from captivity in North Korea. South Korea says the U.S. flew 2 supersonic bombers over the Korean peninsula today in a show of force following the passing of Otto Warmbier. House Intelligence Committee ranking member Adam Schiff is renewing his call for a ban on tourist travel to the communist country. And Arizona Senator John McCain said Americans should have to sign a waiver absolving the U.S. government of blame if they want to go there, calling them, quote, stupid. Chief Washington correspondent James Rosen is at the State Department tonight. Good evening, James.
Brett, good evening. It was during this afternoon's State Department press briefing that President Trump tweeted out what could prove to be a major shift in the U.S. approach to the entire complex of problems presented by North Korea. Quote, while I greatly appreciate the efforts of President Xi and China to help with North Korea, the president said, it has not worked out. At least I know China tried. The tweet comes, of course, following the death yesterday of Otto Warmbier. The 22-year-old Ohio native was held hostage by the regime in Pyongyang for 17 months, returned to U.S. soil last week in a comatose state. Let us state the facts plainly, said Republican Senator John McCain of Arizona, a former prisoner of war himself. Otto Warmbier, an American citizen, was murdered by the Kim Jong-un regime. In the final year of his life, McCain added, he lived the nightmare in which the North Korean people have been trapped for 70 years. Forced labor, mass starvation, systematic cruelty, torture, and murder. Does this administration agree with that statement?
Yeah, I'm not going to comment on what Senator McCain said. I'm familiar with what he said, but I'm just not going to characterize that. We just can't comment on the circumstances of his death right now, but we remain committed, and the Secretary remains very committed to hold North Korea accountable for his death.
The White House said today President Trump was deeply troubled by Warmbier's death and that it was now less likely Mr. Trump would meet directly with North Korean dictator Kim Jong-un. In remarks with his Ukrainian counterpart today, the president called what happened to Warmbier a total disgrace.
He should have been brought home that same day. The result would have been a lot different. But what happened to Otto is a disgrace. And I spoke with his family. His family is incredible, what they've gone through.
3 other Americans remain captive in North Korea, and several Americans are also being held in detention in Iran. Brett.
James Rosen at the State Department. James, thank you. U.S.-led coalition forces say they have killed Turki and al-Bin Ali, ISIS's chief cleric, in a Syria airstrike last month. Al-Bin Ali, who called himself Grand Mufti, was killed in an airstrike on May 31st in Syria, according to a news release from the Combined Joint Task Force, Operation Inherent Resolve. Cleric's main role was recruiting terrorists to cause attacks across the globe. Back here in the U.S., up on Capitol Hill, we'll soon get our first look at the U.S. Senate's opening bid for an Obamacare repeal and replace bill. Chief Congressional Correspondent Mike Emanuel is on the Hill tonight, where Republican senators are feeling the pressure to get something done.
Majority Leader Mitch McConnell says he plans to release a discussion draft of the Senate Republican health care bill Thursday, setting the stage for a vote likely next week.
The status quo is simply unsustainable, as all of our members have pointed out. To ignore that the status quo is imploding is to ignore reality.
GOP sources suggest McConnell's eager to get this done, with issues like raising the debt ceiling, the budget, and tax reform all on the horizon. With 52 Republicans, McConnell can only afford to lose 2 in order to pass health care reform. Most expect Kentucky's Rand Paul is a no, and conservative sources suggest Utah's Mike Lee and Texas's Ted Cruz might be leaning that way. Cruz suggested today what's expected to be in the package must be improved.
I think if we focus on lowering premiums, we can bring together conservatives, we can bring together moderates, we can unify Republicans and actually fulfill the mandate the American people sent us here to do.
Last night, Senate Democrats delivered speeches until just after midnight, trying to fire up their base and make it more difficult on Republican senators.
I would urge my Democratic colleagues, on behalf of the American people, the vast majority of whom know how bad this legislation is, that we have got to stand up and fight in an unprecedented way.
Senate Republicans don't dare let the people back home see this bill. They don't dare let voters see this bill.
Today, Democrats took an additional step, using a procedural tool to shut down hearings after noon.
We need to fight this tooth and nail. If the Republicans were proud of what they were doing, they would be telling the world.
We are going to get this done in 2017.
House Speaker Paul Ryan has turned the page to tax reform.
We will eliminate harmful, burdensome taxes, including the death tax and the alternative minimum tax.
Ryan laid out his vision in an address to the National Association of Manufacturers.
We will consolidate the existing 7 brackets into 3, double the standard deduction, and simplify things to the point that you can do your own taxes on the form the size of a postcard. This instead of the 1040 form. Wouldn't that be nice?
Vice President Mike Pence also reiterated the need to get tax reform done this year. I'm told there are regular weekly meetings between the relevant players in the House, Senate, and the White House, all focused on accomplishing that huge item on the agenda. Brett?
Mike Emanuel live on the Hill. Mike, thanks. More on this with the panel. O.J. Simpson will get a parole hearing next month. The Football Hall of Famer will appear before a panel in Nevada. He could be approved for release October 1st. Simpson is serving a 9 to 33-year sentence for armed robbery and kidnapping. He is, of course, better known for being acquitted in criminal court of killing his former wife and another man back in 1994. Stocks were down today. The Dow lost 62. The S&P 500 was off 16. The Nasdaq fell 51. Gasoline prices do not appear to be headed up for the summer travel season. That's good news. And the continued low pricing has some state government leaders feeling confident enough to try to raise their own gasoline taxes to raise some new money for their states. One of those places, California. That's where correspondent William LaJeunesse is tonight.
You want to have a screwed up state with a bunch of potholes? Go ahead. But that's insane.
California Governor Jerry Brown is leading a pack of states raising their gas tax this year.
States across the country are facing infrastructure issues. Their roads and bridges are aging.
The federal government first imposed a penny a gallon gas tax in 1932. Today, it's 18 cents, but hasn't increased in 24 years. With gas prices now exceedingly low, 28 states raised their gas tax in the last 5 years to an average of 31 cents a gallon. The lowest, Alaska at 12 cents, Pennsylvania the highest at 59, followed by California at a soon-to-be 58 cents a gallon.
If one or two of these lawmakers are removed over this horrendous tax increase, that will send a message to the others.
In California, 58% of voters oppose Brown's gas tax increase. Watch what happens when a top Democratic official confronts those gathering signatures to recall a gas tax supporter.
You're voting yourself out for an hourly wage. And stand up the bully, sign the petition. Stand up the bully, get your stuff out of here.
When gas prices topped $4 a gallon, a federal tax increase was political suicide. Today, a bipartisan group in the House, the Chamber of Commerce, and Labor support a tax increase, something even the president said in May that he'd consider. Brett?
William, thank you. Emergency services in Portugal They're reporting progress against a deadly wildfire in the central part of that country. 64 people have died in Portugal so far. About 1,200 firefighters and 9 aerial tankers are involved in fighting those flames. Temperatures were forecast to reach 109 degrees today. Portugal's prime minister has ordered an investigation into the deaths. Up next, the panel on the importance of today's special congressional election in Georgia and what's happening on Capitol Hill. First, here's what some of our Fox affiliates around the country are covering tonight. Fox 35 in Orlando as city workers begin taking down a Confederate statue located in the Confederate Veterans section of a cemetery. The city will install what's described as an appropriate educational interpretive panel near the monument and then resurrect the statue. Fox 5 in San Diego, where the DEA makes one of the nation's largest seizures of fentanyl. Drug traffickers use this substance to increase the potency of heroin or manufacture counterfeit opioid painkillers. 3 people are charged with possessing almost 100 pounds of this drug, which is enough for millions of lethal doses. And this is a seat traditionally is a Republican seat. As you look at the history here, Newt Gingrich, Johnny Isakson, Tom Price, a lot of time Republicans owning that seat, but this is a very, very close race. The other race tonight, if you want to call Georgia the prize fight, South Carolina maybe is the undercard, we'll see. But South Carolina's 5th congressional district, Archie Parnell and Ralph Norman fighting for the seat left open by Mick Mulvaney, the now Trump budget director. Let's talk about these special elections and begin there. Let's bring in our panel. Michael Crowley, senior foreign affairs correspondent for Politico, Mercedes Schlapp, columnist for the Washington Times, and syndicated columnist Charles Krauthammer. Charles, what about the importance of these events? We've seen them blown up before about how important it is, and then if the Republican wins, it often is, well, there's no big deal to that. But this seems like tonight is a little different.
Look, these things are 90% hype. They're generally not predictive. In 2010, there was no indication that you would have a Republican sweep, as you did in 2010. But I can't predict who's going to win, but I can predict with absolute certainty what the headlines are going to be. If the Democrat wins, the headlines are going to be, in referendum on Trump, Democrats win. I can guarantee you. If he loses, the headlines will be, in a race that doesn't mean anything, in a special election with special circumstances, with turnout problematic, etc. They'll say that, of course, the Republicans won the seat with Tom Price by 23 points last time, so what do you expect? So this is how it's going to be played. Everybody's waiting. If there's a stumble by the Republicans, it'll be hyped from here to Sunday. But I really think these special elections are very special. Where else are you going to pour in $25 million into a House race? It's rather insane. And the 2018 elections are more than, a year away. Year and a quarter away. So a lot will be read into it, but that's because there's a lot of dead air time.
Michael, it's the most expensive House race ever in Georgia, but across the nation, the most expensive ever. And obviously, the president weighing in, Democrat John Ossoff, who wants to raise your taxes to the highest level and is weak on crime and security, doesn't even live in district. Karen Handel for Congress, she will fight for lower taxes, great health care, strong security, a hard worker who will never give up. A vote today. Obviously, President Trump factoring in both of these congressional elections tonight.
Yeah, and I think that there were some mixed reactions among Republicans about the president tweeting about this race. I think there's a desire or a strategic thinking among some Republicans that you don't want to nationalize this. You don't want to make this a referendum on Donald Trump. His approval ratings are under 50%, and it might be better to keep this election on the local level. So when he tweets like that, he inserts himself in the race. I think there's some people who think that's not the best idea, but, maybe it does rally the Republican base, and we'll see whether it winds up being a plus. I would just say, in generally, the way I think about this, Bret, is that the ancient Romans used to sacrifice animals and pull out the entrails to find clues about omens for the future and what was going to happen. I think these special elections are a similar kind of ritual where we always do it. The entrails are often wrong, but we all gather around and do it anyway. I think Charles is right. We read too much into these races generally.
And for all of you enjoying dinner, we apologize for the graphic visualization. Mercedes, what about this race specifically in Georgia? Do you think they had some bad weather?
Right.
Turnout's a big deal, obviously, in every race. But the conventional wisdom was that Democrats were motivated at the beginning. Then you had a couple of events. You had, obviously, Kathy Griffin and that holding the head up, and that kind of turned the tide.
Right.
Then, unfortunately, you had the shooting with Republicans targeted, including Scalise. And did that change the dynamic late in the game in this race?
You know, I think it definitely benefited Handel in that sense. With that being said, I think Ossoff changed his narrative from being make Trump furious to being more of a moderate candidate. He's talking about cutting government spending. Now, let's be real. He's a wolf in sheep's clothing. It's very clear. And what I'm getting real-time information, which I know you love, Bret, is that right now what we're seeing is presidential level turnout for Republicans. They're also saying there's a sense right now, there's an encouraging side on the Republican side that Democrats are running out of voters. When you look at that district, it's 59,000 of those in the registered voters are Republican. 31,000 are Democrats. Ossoff was hoping that there would be this crossover. It's why he shifted his message. But it looks like so far what's coming in right now is that the Republicans are feeling a bit positive that it's going to work in Handel's favor.
And if it, I mean, obviously we're going to let this play out. And the polls close in about 45 minutes across Georgia and South Carolina as well. A couple of the polls are open until 7:30 because of technical issues. But, Charles, does it make an agenda a statement about the Trump agenda on Capitol Hill if Karen Handel pulls this out in a contested race in Georgia? I know you said it doesn't matter in 2018. Right. Does it matter now on health care and tax reform?
I doubt it'll have any effect, I mean, unless it's an extremely unexpected result with a huge margin that sort of surprises everyone. In the absence of that, I don't think it's any effect on what's going to happen in the Congress. I have heard a rumor, though, however, that on your 11 o'clock special tonight, you're bringing on a goat. So I just want to make sure I...
Yep. It may actually happen.
Did you say a goat?
A goat.
A goat?
Yeah.
That was back to the entrails.
Got it. Oh, this is,
it's very deep in the weeds here. Forget it.
Sure somebody is going to have to bring a knife. So
that's called a deep tease.
But, Bret, I do think that there could be some short-term psychological effect. I mean, it's just inevitable. And Charles is maybe right about the headlines, and maybe they won't be totally fair in some cases, but the reality psychologically is I think that it will give momentum to the push to repeal and replace Obamacare if Republicans get a win, and it's going to be harder to do if they don't. Also, if Democrats get a win, I think it's going to be a lot easier to recruit candidates and start raising money for 2018. I think that's a big factor.
Right, and the swing districts, this might be an example for them of getting a more moderate candidate as opposed to a Bernie Sanders progressive burn down. You know, the Republicans, they're going to want to go with someone like an Ossoff in these swing districts. Those are the type of candidates they're going to want to recruit and change their message.
Well, there's no way they capture the House if they don't have those candidates. There's the old Heath Schuler candidates from North Carolina that largely went away in the past couple of years. Quickly, this kind of hide the ball by Republicans on the actual details of the health care bill, brilliant or running out of steam here?
I think it's necessary. It's not a brilliant idea. It alienates a lot of people. But it's the only way to do it, because if you open up the process at the beginning or the middle, you never get to the end. You've got to present something. You got to do that behind closed doors. Then you present it, and then you fight it out, which is the only way that Mitch McConnell could have done it, and that's the way he's doing it.
We hear we'll see some kind of draft tomorrow or possibly Thursday, and the health care bill, as it moves forward, they're trying to pass something through the Senate before July 4th. We'll keep you updated on the race.